Can we talk for a minute about our Integrating Heart and Mind workshop?
Absolutely. I'm excited. It's coming up in the fall of 2024.
I'm so excited. We changed the format to make it more accessible to people with like work schedules and personal schedules. And so this time we're going to do it 3 hours on a Friday afternoon or evening, depending on where you're at, and 5 hours on Saturday for 2 different weeks in September.
Yeah, it's so great. Like if you're finding yourself stuck in like sticky bad patterns or having communication issues or something like that, or if you want to just like get closer and trust yourself or your partner more, this is the workshop for you.
Yeah, and individuals are welcome, couples are welcome. If you're interested in really thinking through how to serve yourself well inside of your relationships, then we've built a workshop that will support you in finding the ways that are just right for you.
To sign up, head over to our website at whydoesmypartner.com/events.
We hope you'll join us. Welcome to the Why Does My Partner podcast.
I'm Jules.
I'm Vicky.
And I'm Rebecca. We're your hosts. We're also couples therapists and messy humans bumbling through our own relationships every day.
We met at a training, and our secret sauce is that we and our partners became fast friends. Between us, we have more than 40 years of experience holding hard relational questions with our clients. We're going to bring those questions here.
And together, we're going to take a stab at answering those questions. This podcast is not a substitute for couples therapy. If something you hear in this podcast stirs something deep within you about your relationship, reach out to a couples therapist in your area.
We also love to hear your questions, so don't forget to go over to whydoesmypartner.com to leave a question of your own. Here's today's question. So today's question comes from a listener who wrote in and asked us if we would consider talking about the dynamics between interracial couples and the conflicts that arise from their cultural differences.
Yes. I say yes. I say let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the things that comes up for me right away is how much misinterpretation there can be, because I'm guessing that what you're doing means something based on my landscape and my history and my culture, right? And then what you're actually doing means something different in your culture, but I'm projecting my label of what that means. So I think the situation is totally ripe for a bunch of misinterpretations and projections and guesses about what the other person's intentions are that are easy to mess up. So there's one of my big pieces is, wait a second. Can we put a huge pause between the thought we're having and whether or not we believe it?
Yeah. I'm also thinking about intergenerational trauma and intergeneracial learnings, epigenetics, the stuff that's passed down, and how much culturally and racially there is embedded in those learnings. Like different groups of people have suffered different forms of oppression in history. And for some groups of people who have really, really known oppression
and violence
and genocide, and, right? Like there are things that land differently in their bodies than for people whose historical, like not just the individual right here, right now, but generations back, whose like people who live in white bodies have different experiences than people who live in bodies of color. And different bodies of color and different bodies of culture have different experiences than one another. Right? And so there's intergenerational learnings and knowings experiences of what is safe and what is unsafe, of how we process and how we deal with these things in different bodies that go beyond family of origin stuff, that move into intergenerational pieces. And I think that's a really important piece for us to just note.
Yeah. And because we talk a lot about, okay, so what do you do with that information? I think it's about slowing things down.
So much.
Like you said.
It's about putting a pause. Wait, slow things down.
Right.
And how does this actually feel in your body? And can you even be curious with me out loud about what those things that are happening in your body may mean for you personally, for you from your family of origin that you come from the larger cultural landscape that you come from maybe generations back? Can we be curious together about what knowings live inside us?
I think that slowing down process is so incredibly important, especially when there's big conversations and big issues that can otherwise create a conflict. I'm thinking of a few interracial couples that I've worked with in my practice, where when it comes to making big life decisions like buying land, buying a house, right?
Yep.
The weight that those decisions carry is different for people who are in bodies of color who have traditionally not been allowed to own land than they are for people who are in white bodies who have generations upon generations upon generations of landowners in their history.
Yep. I'm thinking of someone I worked with. It was a different cultural background, but the knowing was everything can be taken away from you at any moment. And so buying land is a stupid way to spend money. You should spend money only on education. That's the thing nobody can take.
Yeah, because that's your time.
It lives you in your brain. So I'm just thinking, because there was so much genocide culturally in this person's history, that buying land was a really scary. It was scary and in the family of origin thought of as a dumb way to spend money.
And I worked with a mixed race couple where it was the opposite, where the person of color was the one who buying land really meant something. Nobody in my family has ever been able to buy land before. And for the white partner in the relationship, it was, I feel guilty buying land because I feel right. So there were different
other issues.
There were different pieces, and still the work for them was to slow down, to listen to themselves and to listen to one another. There wasn't a right or a wrong, but it was, let's slow down to navigate this.
Yeah.
I also want to point out that sometimes there are much more superficial, flippant issues that come up. Like when one culture is about pushing food on people, not like obesity, but like in the Arab culture, like you're supposed to ask like 5,000 times until the guest finally says, yes, I'll eat it.
Right. So if I was at your house and then I said no to your tea, then you would both be like, but you have to have the tea and the cookies and the amazing.
I still want to say yes to that, but you guys also know that we're very Americanized.
I know.
So
I know.
No, but in theory, yes.
Yes.
Like that. Yes, in theory, but we're too Americanized for that. But so there are all these absolutely deep generational cultural issues. Yes. So I don't want to, I'm not minimizing, but there's also families that have these much more, I don't like the word superficial. That's not it.
No, it's hospitality though, right?
Yeah, thank you. Yes. And so, and it's still about pause and slow down and breathe. And Jules, you had alluded at the beginning, I just want to name it. It's one of my favorite skills, the story in my head. And so it's about having a conversation of like, I do call it the story in my head. I say that term a lot in my marriage, not even about us, but like such and such just happened. This is the story in my head.
Another way to say that is what I'm guessing that means is.
Yes.
Another way to say that is what I'm making up is. Another way to say that is what I'm thinking and trying not to believe is.
Another way to say it is what I'm imagining is.
Yes.
Well, clearly, there's a lot of different ways.
There's a lot of ways so you can find your way.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of ways to bring these stories in. And what I have been bringing into my work more and more lately is something that I've taken and learned from Resmaa Menakem. And in terms of the slowing down, in terms of the finding that pause, what I've been teaching my people is that when they need that pause, to practice what Resmaa calls Vimbasi, which in the somatic experiencing world, we have other words for. In interpersonal neurobiology, there's other words, right? Like there's other different mnemonic ways of remembering this. But I love Vimbasi because it really, it hits on more of the cultural aspects of some of this. So Vimbasi stands for, the V is for vibes and vibration. Like checking in and being able to track the vibes and vibration that you're picking up in your body. I stands for images and thoughts. Right? Like a thing that you're remembering, like a dream kind of space or something along those lines. M stands for meaning making. That would be the story in my head. Right? B stands for behaviors and urges. A stands for affects and feelings. S stands for sensations. And then I, which I really love, the second I stands for imagination. It's like, you know, kind of like the, what could it be? What could it become? Right? Because
almost
so
in a
much
hopeful way. Am I getting that right?
I think it's beyond hope. It's because it's not just hope. It's like, it's like the seeds, you know, like.
That's what I meant. Yeah. It's like the good stuff in the future, like of happening, not what could it be that's all the negative stuff I'm imagining. That's what I'm just trying to parcel out.
Or it could be both imaginings.
It could be both. It could, like
it doesn't have to be positive imaginings.
Right. So like, I think imagination in many ways, it helps us see a future. Right. And so I think, you know, whatever that might be, I don't want to classify it good or bad.
Right.
But I think it helps us move. And like when Resmaa talks about imagination, he also talks about imaginary cells and butterfly goo, and how when the caterpillar is inside of the cocoon, it turns into this, like, the cells actually completely transform and become something different. And then comes the butterfly, but the cells have to go through this transformation process. And so imagination lives in that space of transformation.
Okay.
Right?
Wow.
It invites it. So
slow it down. So for folks at home, how would you use this to have a deeper exploration?
Right. So the way that I use it comes from what Resmaa teaches, which is to take these moments to slow things down and do like a little scribing, right? Where you use Vimbasi, right? The Vimbasi.
Yeah, so you could put it in like a little list.
You put it in a little list, and then you're literally just tracking each of these things through your nervous system, through your body. And it's like it helps you to connect with the different knowledge, the different knowings, the different way that you hold information, and really learn more about yourself. And then if you can do that, now I go into imagination. Now imagine the conversation that you can bring forward with your partner if you're both doing that.
Right. And this gets to cultural differences in a huge way, because I'm sitting here in a body that's a white body and having enough history that I've divorced from my body. Now, I'm not as divorced as I was. I'm pretty good at tracking now, but it was a journey for me. And the word vibrations or vibes or energy feels really foreign to me. But then I'm imagining my partner, who is amazing at reading people. And it has cultural differences from me. We actually don't come from the same kind of background. And he would be like, vibes, of course. So I'm sitting here thinking like, oh, how cool that we could hang together and I could learn something about a new way of thinking or being with yourself or being with each other that's different from how I was taught to be with myself or be with other people.
That's right.
Rebecca, are you actually saying that you take the pause and then I want people to hear this? I do it too. And you either there or go somewhere else and literally pay attention to all these things and sometimes write them down.
And sometimes you're in the car going grocery shopping. You can't do that right then.
Right.
But in that case, I just like pause and slow down.
But you still like slow down and try to think, because what I do quickly is like, what's this really about for me right now? I mean, that's a much quicker, superficial version.
But I might sit with it.
Really do this.
I might sit with it and go like, okay, wait, what am I feeling right now? Like, am I feeling any vibes? Is there any image coming up for me? Like, what's the thought in my, right? So like, I'm kind of going through the Vimbasi list, right? And I'm coming up, I'm learning more. It's giving me an invitation. It's opening a doorway for me to go, oh, what's going on, Rebecca? What's happening inside of you? And if my partner is also doing that or witnesses me doing it, or if I just simply do it myself and then turn to my partner and say, here's what I'm figuring out about myself right now. Right. It gives him, or it gives whoever you're partnered with, it gives them an opportunity to sit and figure out like, oh, well, maybe it's different for me. Right. Because so much, I think of what interracial mixed couples are working through are differences. How do we navigate our differences? We have different ways. We have different learnings. We have different knowings in our body. Different things feel safe to us or unsafe to us.
One of the biggest differences I see coming in every time I work with this is differences around what is appropriate boundaries inside families.
Sorry.
So it's just
because Arabs have none.
Right. So
sorry to Arabs out there who do. I don't mean to be that judgmental coming from the Arab family, but like there's
right. So there's
blended.
and I'm only going to speak as an American mutt. There tends to be a lot of thought about boundaries and respecting boundaries and not sharing as much or not getting in each other's space. There's a lot of talk about enmeshment, stuff like that. So I just think that when we're talking about that, and if you're a couple who struggles with boundary differences for whatever reason, whether it's cultural or what, it doesn't matter.
Or just familial.
Or what do you like when it comes to boundaries? I would say slow down. Again, this is the Slow Down Podcast, everybody. So what we can do is slow down and talk about, okay, so if I did things totally your way, what dream would be met for you? And if you did things totally my way, what dream would be met for me? Then we can get away from talking about who's respecting or not respecting whose boundaries. We have two different definitions of what boundaries even mean, because we have these cultural differences around it. Now let's drop away from that and talk about what needs get met when we're approaching each other in certain ways, what dreams get met when we're approaching each other in certain ways, so that we can creatively come up with a different way of talking about this, rather than somebody accusing someone else of not respecting boundaries, or which boundaries are we supposed to be respectful of? The one who has more porous ones or the one who has more rigid ones? Yeah.
There's something really niggling at me that I need to talk about.
Yeah, do it.
Our culture is really, really, really freaking centered on whiteness.
Yeah.
We don't even see it. We're swimming in it. And we live inside of a system where we are just, there's systems of oppression that favor people who are not melanated, that favor people who are often male, who are cisgendered, who are heterosexual, who are Christian, who are English speaking, who are born in the US. Right? And I think we have to name that, because inside of relationships, how do we navigate and know like what's what, especially when we're talking about boundaries, if we're not also looking at the water that we're swimming in?
Yeah. And who knows what, I'm thinking about different people who could be listening to this, people who are both in bodies of color and who are not from the same cultural background, and somebody who's white, who's married to someone who isn't like that.
Different things land in different bodies differently.
And what I would suggest is there's not a right or wrong way to do boundaries.
Yeah.
There's not a right or wrong. Porous isn't bad and rigid good. Rigid isn't bad and porous good. No. Wait a second.
I just love it when you say that. That's why I'm sitting here smiling, because
right.
I love that you see the nuance of that. I've heard you say in different trainings or whatever, that like sometimes when I'm on the couch with my kiddo, I'm going to be porous and it's wonderful. And then when I'm who knows, XYZ at a restaurant and an airplane or something, I need rigid, and that's okay for that time.
Yeah.
And so
I'm trapped on an airplane next to a guy who's saying a lot of stuff that is really hard.
Take a Dramamine and go to sleep. That's what I do. I have to. By the way, I don't take it for that reason. I have to.
But let me hold you there, because now if you were in a body of culture, it might not be safe for you to take a Dramamine and go to sleep. While you're traveling. You might have to think about safety in a whole different way.
Absolutely.
And so if you have a white partner who's then saying, oh, just take a Dramamine and go to sleep, that's dismissing something that's really big inside of your nervous system.
Right. And so I think if we're in a relationship that has any difference at all, and these differences in particular, I would say, how much space are we leaving to listen to bodies that tend towards getting marginalized?
Yeah.
It's not, the culture does that.
Yeah.
And to allow more space. So if you're a person who's married to someone who is not in a body that's white, cis male, if your partner doesn't fall into that category, that's a body that has a little bit less privilege in our culture. So what would it be like to make space for them to share how things land for them first? As we're having this conversation. And how can we make space with each other to be really curious about how are we going to make this marriage work when we bring differences to the table? And doing it just one person's way or just the other person's way, I promise you, is not going to work very well.
Right.
It ends up, here's the thing. If somebody's willing to shut up and just swallow it, it can work if work means we don't get divorced. If work means we hang out together for a while. But I don't know that it works if what you want is to know each other incredibly well. So I'm wondering, part of this question is a U-turn. How well do I want to understand my partner? And is there any risk in that for me? Is there fear in that for me? If so, let's start there. You know what I want to hear, but I'm feeling a little freaked out about when I hear the differences between us, what that's going to mean for me. Because we jump. Here's the thing. Here's your trick. When you're listening, do not jump to what this is going to mean to you 5 minutes from now, 5 years from now, 20 years from now. When you're listening, listen to understand the other person.
Yeah. It's really about being able to see your partner's experience, have compassion and empathy for their experience, and be honest about what you don't know.
With curiosity.
Yeah.
So you could learn about how does the world differ for them than it does for you? And how do you then learn how to take care of each other in that space? Yeah. Feels like a good place for us to land today.
Yeah. Thanks so much for listening.
Stay protected and connected.
Take care.
That wraps up this week's episode. Join us again next week for another Why Does My Partner?
We hope that you continue to listen wherever you get your audio and that you'll follow the show.
To go deeper, join us at one of our workshops. You'll find our next date at whydoesmypartner.com.
Did you know you can ask us your questions?
Your questions are relational gold.
Go to whydoesmypartner.com to either write in or record your question for a future episode.
And here are some gratitudes. Thanks to Al Huberman, our sound editor and podcast production magic maker.
Thanks to every one of you who has joined us for our workshops in the past. We've learned so much from all of you.
And thanks to everyone who's reviewed the show on Apple Podcasts. Your reviews help others to find the show.
Take care of each other best you can.
See you next time.